My name is Chris Connell. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Compono, and today I'm joined by the wonderful and amazing Manisha Bullen, who is our People Analytics Platform expert. And so Manisha and I look really excited to be spending this short amount of time with you this morning. We've had the privilege of being able to work with hiring managers and people leaders right across the country over the last 25 years. And between us, we've worked with hundreds of hiring managers. We've also been able to be hiring managers ourselves in our own teams. Yeah, awesome. We've also been hiring managers ourselves, managing teams. And so I think with that combination, we have a unique understanding of the challenges that are facing hiring managers. I'm sure many of the people joining us this morning online. So one of the key things that Manisha and I were talking about actually just prior to this session, and that we've both been through in previous roles, is the pain and the impact of making a bad hire. And I'm sure most, if not all of us, will admit that that's been something that we've experienced if we've been team leaders, in the past. So, not only the emotional impact that can have, the culture impact that can have, but also the cost, right, associated with that. So, I think those experiences in part are what drew both Manisha and I to Compono and the mission here at this company.
Thanks, Chris. Look, the title of this webinar is The New Way to Shortlist Candidates Changes Everything. Changes everything. Now, that's a big claim, hey?
Certainly is.
For the last 20 years, we've been shortlisting and hiring, candidates the same way. I know that there's a lot of technology that's come onto the market, but if you think about it, you see a lot of process and efficiency gains, but there's not really any change in the way that we hire. So I'm sure people on the audience are thinking, why do we need a new way of shortlisting candidates? Do we really need to change anything?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I'm sure from many or perhaps a few of the people joining us today, there's an element of curiosity. But what's this all about, right? And so firstly, it's a great question. Why do we even need to question our shortlisting process and the way that we've been doing things? Well, why don't we tackle this on a couple of different levels? Let's look at the macro level, what's going on, globally, and what those trends, those workforce trends look like, but then also deep dive down into the shortlisting process itself. So I'm sure some of you on this webinar today have seen the recent Gallup report into the state of the workplace. It's pretty alarming if you haven't. So I do recommend checking it out and just seeing what's going on out there. And look, I do want to say, look, what I'm about to share is, a global average, right? Every company is a little bit different. How these numbers affect you is going to be a little bit different. But I think it's important to understand what the global trends look like at the moment. And, it's pretty scary to see this research that suggests 77% of employees at the average company are not engaged, either fully and actively disengaged or partly disengaged in some way. That's a really scary stat, right? That really is very confronting. And then, of course, the question is, well, why is that? And what can I do about it? Now, absolutely, there's a number of factors that are going to play into this. But what's interesting is when you ask employees, the thing that they lean on the most, the thing they put their hand up about the most, the thing they want to see change is culture, right? And a lot of that comes down to this culture misalignment problem that's affecting the engagement of our workforces. So, that really speaks to the challenges I'm sure most of us are facing, most of the people on this webinar today. So, if we want to have more engaged people, we need a way to have more alignment between people and culture, our ways of working and our norms, right? But then the question is how. So, this is a really big challenge that I'm sure we're all facing. Now, as we said into the lead up of this webinar, one of the most important yet time-consuming parts of the hiring process is working out who to shortlist. And so taking that idea and now, thinking about the shortlisting process itself, we have to get shortlisting right. Manisha, what does your shortlisting process look like today?
Well, let's talk about before I was working at Compono. Look, I used to spend ages sifting through piles of CVs, and they'd come from all over different sources, trying to work out who to shortlist. And look, I have to admit, I had some biases, right? I would dismiss the ones that had spelling mistakes or created a format I didn't like. I used to think that if candidates didn't take care with their CVs, and maybe that's indicative of some kind of attitude to the way that they approach things. I also have to admit, I really like those concise CVs, the ones that are like 2 pages or less, especially when somebody's got a real long career. I think that's a real skill. So, Chris, what do you think makes a good CV? I quite like the ones with the new photograph,
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it speaks to subjectivity. I think the reality is we'll all have a slightly different answer to that question. I can certainly, a nicely presented resume is going to be influenced, maybe a nice professional photo, all those sorts of elements. What's interesting, I mean, I actually am a scanner, so I like resumes that bold keywords, through the text, right? So I think the point is that we all have a subjective way of thinking about what a good resume is, how you like to see the information. But I think it's also the wrong conversation. And, if we want to call it an argument or back and forth about what best looks like, I think we're actually missing the ball. Because even if we did agree on what a great resume looked like, what's really interesting is that what's going on in the market today is not actually telling us what we think it's telling us. And so I actually saw this on LinkedIn only last week, which is a cheat sheet for job seekers, right? So we all know the rise of AI being integrated more and more into everything. Even if we thought a resume somewhat reflected the personality and professionalism even of the person applying, less and less of the time they're actually developing that resume, right? So less and less the time those sort of data points are actually going to be accurate as we start to think about these people. And look, I almost put a picture of the Terminator here and the whole rise of the machine things because, when you think on the other side, now you've got hiring technology, and so you've got now machines talking to machines. And so the question, of course, is where does that human element come in?
The machines are taking over, Chris.
Exactly, exactly. So, look, what are we trying to achieve, right, when we're shortlisting candidates? Let's think about this. We're looking for data points that help give us some predictive data, right? We're trying to get a sense of are they going to be worth the time and investment to go through interview processes and all the other things that go with that? What can I find out about this candidate that's going to give me some sense of how well they're going to join my company and do the job, do the best job, whatever best means for you, of course, from the candidates that are applying. And the primary data points we get from a resume are skills, quals, and experience, right? So if they're the three data points we primarily get from a resume, of course, that's the way we're going to be shortlisting candidates, right?
But Chris, even if you put away all my biases when looking at resumes, I mean, experience, skills, and qualifications, they're pretty important, right?
Absolutely. So I'm not suggesting that experience is not and skills are important are not going to be skills, qualifications, and experience are not going to be data points. But what's really interesting, I'm not sure how many people online right now have actually seen this. I suggest you Google it. It's a really interesting read from Harvard Business Review. That experience is really one of the primary data points we use to shortlist, but it has a very weak correlation with on-the-job success when you join a new company and join a new role. Now, that's a pretty confronting, and to be honest, it feels wrong, right? It just, I don't know, when I first read this report, it just didn't fit. It really impacted me. It felt like a punch in the gut almost. But this is a review across 81 different studies to show that experience as a data point, a standalone data point, doesn't have strong correlation to how well someone joins a new company, a new role, and performs in that role. Right. And again, I do encourage you to read it because it's a really interesting read. And so what I want to say, just let me say up front in case anyone's thinking it, I'm not saying that experience isn't going to be a data point in your shortlisting process. It's going to be. We're realistic, right? But, we need to think about skills and quals as well. They're definitely going to be data points in your hiring process. And it depends on the role, of course, but qualifications can be a critical data point in some roles, right? And so that's why here at Compono, we have invested heavily in powerful skills and qualification libraries and allowing you to automate and match for those things. The point I'm trying to make is this resume data layer isn't enough. We've got to get to data points about candidates at some scale here, right? When we're going through a hiring process that have stronger correlation with on-the-job success. And those are going to be related to attitudes, attributes, and work motivations.
Yeah, that's pretty hard, Chris, right? Because that stuff's not on a resume. Look, I've seen a bunch of people build personality tests into their recruitment process. And some of these tests are pretty powerful, right? But one thing that we've been noticing is that there seems to be only one variable in the hiring process. People are only thinking about the candidate. And so this is one of the really important things that we want you guys on the webinar to take away with you today. I mean, if it's the only thing you remember, it's this. We think that you shouldn't start with your candidates and work in. We believe that the way that companies hire is fundamentally flawed, because today's hiring process just assumes that there's only that one variable. And they think that the businesses hiring are all the same. Now, everyone on the webinar, you all work for different companies, and throughout your careers, you've probably worked for different companies. And, they're all different, right? The way they're structured, the way your managers are, the way you work. So we think this is clearly wrong. So that's why you shouldn't start with your candidates and work in. You should start with your business and work out.
Amazing. And I do want to emphasize that we've covered so much already. So we're thinking about all the data points that we're missing on the candidate side, but it's a really interesting point, isn't it? We need to start with ourselves, and that being such a critical, when we talk about new and more effective shortlisting processes, how important this first step really is. So when you say, Manisha, start with your business and work out, what does that actually mean?
Well, look, this is where you need some people analytics, right? People analytics is like having a corporate psychologist in your back pocket. Now, look, I'm lucky at Component. I've actually got a corporate psychologist, but that's not normal for organizations, and all organizations work differently. So when you're thinking about understanding your organization, you're trying to work out, how do we do things around here, right? Or another way of thinking about it is like, what's your business personality, right? So Chris, can you help the audience just kind of think through that a little bit?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So for everyone who's listening now, so to have a think about your own organization, jump into your own business for a sec. If I asked you, is your business more risk adverse or innovative? What would you say? More accepting or questioning? More individualist or collectivist? Right? When we talk about every business being different, every business is different on a whole number of dimensions that add up to the way their business works and become a business personality, right? So every business is just as different as every candidate. So it's really, really important to be able to understand the personality of your business if you want to understand the kinds of candidates that are going to suit your particular business.
Yes, Chris. And like, even outside of the context of hiring, this kind of information is pretty powerful. Hey, you can see how your business is running. You can compare different teams and departments and locations, and you can try and understand whether the way that your business is working actually going to meet those strategic goals that we set for ourselves every year. And it helps you think about where you might have misalignment and actually start a change plan, actually think about doing things a bit differently. But look, we're here to talk about hiring, right? And what's really important is that once you understand how your business works, you can actually use that information as a benchmark for hiring. So, a hiring benchmark means that a candidate can directly share what environments they prefer, and your people analytics platform can actually automatically assess and score how well that matches the way that your business works.
Yeah, amazing. So,
which is exactly this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's amazing. So, and this is the way so basically what we've got here is a great way to match the way that that you have your culture and your ways of working, actually seeing if that matches the candidate. But what about at the team level? Do you think people analytics can actually show us how well a candidate will match with your team? Well, the answer is yes, actually. People science shows that there are actually 8 key different types of work that are crucial for high performing teams, right? And so what we do is we measure an individual's work personality, and you can find out what type of work that individual is most likely naturally drawn towards. And you can see, even from that, you can start to see what kind of role they're going to play in the team. And when it gets really, really powerful is when you look at those work types and you think of that at a team level and understand that interplay between individuals as a whole. You start to see strengths and gaps and blind spots in the team. And again, some of these gaps can be filled by processes and systems. But the next time you're hiring or you're thinking about, moving people into your team, you've got powerful information. You're fully armed. And you can make decisions then. You can think about whether you want to double down onto the strengths of that team or actually, make some way to fill those gaps. Chris, I think you've got some examples of this, haven't you?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So one that springs to mind is work we did with the safety team within a mining company. So I don't need to tell anyone online that safety in a mining company is a pretty important department, pretty important team. And so they'd hired really well, people that were amazing at policies, procedures, risk assessments, all of those sorts of things. The challenge, though, that they came to realize was that they were struggling to get those policies and procedures actually adopted by the rest of the business. What they came to realize is they needed a different kind of person to join their team. So I'm not now talking about different qualifications or skills or experience. They were all still the same. But what they needed was someone who had a natural way of working that could communicate what they were doing out to the business, to sell, to network, to promote, to drive that change management. They were lacking someone who would work within a team context like that. And so looking to hire someone like that, they were able to much more effectively drive the change management that the policies and procedures were there to do. So really, I just wanted to provide that quick example as this is really about how we start to build teams that are more high performing overall. So, look, let's just get back to shortlisting for a sec. So we've covered some really interesting stuff there, candidate assessment and business assessment and bringing it together. But what does that all mean? Let's bring it back to the shortlisting process itself, right? We have these two things in our arsenal. What does that mean for the hiring manager? What does that mean for the organization? So you might recognize Andrew Banks, who's one of our key investors in the, put his little photo here because he loves this quadrant. He talks to this all the time. So when you think about where most hiring processes and shortlisting processes are today, it's all bottom access. It's 2D. We're seeing skills and quals and experience. Covered that already. What we want to be able to do is take the shortlisting process kind of to 3D in a sense, right? To put that left axis in, work motivations, attitudes, and attributes, and be able to do that at scale for all the candidates that are applying for your roles. So, look, most of you will know already, there's basically 4 kinds of candidates for any role. And so what we're able to do with this now is to automatically place each candidate into their correct quadrant. So the first quadrant is the looks wrong is wrong. So that means they look wrong on paper, and they are wrong when we assess whether they're a good fit for the team, good fit for your business. That's where you save time. These are candidates we don't have to go through and potentially even set up, interviews if you went that far and waste time doing that. So this is a time-saving benefit. The next quadrant is the looks right is right. These are candidates that look great on paper, look great in terms of their application, their resume, and we're able to see are right. They're a great fit for our culture, a great fit for the team they're joining. So this is where we want to be. This is where we want to have speed to connect. We want to be able to quickly identify in real time which these candidates and be able to get them into the interview, get them connected, get them engaged straight away. The third quadrant is what I call the landmine quadrant. This is the looks right but is wrong. These are the candidates where they look good on paper, but they're actually not a good fit for your business. This is often where, this whole, challenge of making a bad hire often sits here because we were looking at this resume data and they look good and we gave them a crack. And then a few weeks in, we're starting to think, I don't know if this is quite working out. And all of a sudden we're working towards offboarding of costs and the impact that can have. And then the last quadrant is probably my favorite quadrant, which is the looks wrong but is right quadrant. So these are the candidates that you would never have given an interview for. They would have been dismissed straight away, but we're actually able to see they're a really good fit for your organization. Now, this can open up a whole new stream of potential talent. Because we can identify those candidates where without people analytics, they'd get missed, right? We wouldn't be able to see them at all. And often the reason they didn't get an interview might just be down to simple things like they missed a skill or something. Now, skills and even qualifications and experience, these are all things that you can fix. If I want to use that word, it's maybe not exactly the right word, but I think you know what I mean. Motivations, attitudes, and attributes, they're hard, right? You can't really change that about people. That's a very difficult and time-consuming and lengthy thing, to try to do, and we're not going to try to do that, obviously. So this is where you'll be able to find candidates that are a great fit for your business and maybe just fill some gaps effectively.
So, Chris, look, I wanted to bring this back to Compono now. Look, we've talked quite generally about shortlist and, doing things differently. But what does Compono and our platform mean for hiring managers? So what it really means is just far more information about candidates than people have ever had before, right? It's easier and it's quicker. And Compono acts like a coach, right? It helps you understand the sorts of people you need in your team. And then voila, Compono assesses, scores, ranks candidates and based on their organization fit, their motivation, their work preferences, their skills and qualifications. And all of this happens before we've even opened the resume, which is amazing, right? So it's doing so much of the work for you. Look, Chris, it looks like we've got about 10 minutes. I'm just wondering, we've got some time for some frequently asked questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we come across to this first one? Now, look, Manisha, I've worked with sort of hundreds of hiring managers, as I mentioned earlier, and one of the common questions we get, and I'm sure some of you online are big proponents of personality tests, right? You're using that actively, or you have in other organizations or other roles. Things like DISC, Neo, others, there's a whole bunch of them. And so some people think, okay, well, hang on, if I'm using personality tests already, how does this fit with what, this people analytics platform? How do the two things sort of work together, or do they work together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. And look, we didn't design these to, replace these personality tests. We think of them as being complementary. Um, I mean, like you said here, they're pretty expensive and time consuming if you want to do them at scale. You can have hundreds of candidates applying for a job. You can't do a big, DISC personality assessment on all of them. And that's what Compono gives you, right? It's, assessment at scale. Also, the personality tests, they don't really think about, the work context and how people, how that affects people at work, which is what we do. And also, the thing that's very, very different and a big change in the way that we're suggesting you should do recruitment is that they don't assess your business, which makes it really hard to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting, and I'm sure resonates with some people here. And I think that key thing is that I think the biggest difference here is where you want to apply a test, the front end or the back end. So what we're talking about, and I think you've seen already, people analytics apply to the front end for all the time saving, efficiency that brings, but also the outcomes, the better hiring decisions, right? The predictive data, but still that capacity to use personality tests then at the back end because of some of the restrictions and limitations that Manisha you just covered there. Awesome. Let's move on to the next frequent question that we get asked as we start to think about, well, if I implemented a platform like this in my business, what could I expect with respect to business impact? And so there's many different ways to answer that question. Hopefully you've already started to think about the time saving and efficiency aspects. I think they're pretty straightforward. And then I think the other thing to think about, and maybe we go back to the Gallup report. Remember that workplace productivity and that state of the workplace report I mentioned earlier, and the whole state of disengagement across the workforce at the moment. If we think about that side of things, according to that Gallup data, lost productivity costs businesses $3,400 for every $10,000 in salary.
Yeah, wow.
So you can do your own math here, and the average salary at your business, how many people you've got, and I just put a few examples here to give you some sense of what that looks like. So, for lost productivity today, as you can see in that middle column, it's really significant. And so if you were to leverage a people analytics platform, let's be super conservative. Let's say it only improved your ability to bring better fit, better engaged people into your business by 20%. That's some pretty significant potential productivity gains that you're going to be able to make on the back end of that. Awesome. Now, Manisha, I think it's a time for a question for you, because I know this one comes up a lot because we've covered so far, we've talked about assessments and predictive data and getting better candidate data, but some people will be thinking, how about getting candidates for the role? The bit that goes before that, do we do a bit of that as well?
Yeah, good question. We're actually a full hiring solution. You can create jobs. We have hundreds of inbuilt templates, which saves people a lot of time. As well as that, you've mentioned throughout this talk, Chris, how important skills and qualifications are. We have that taxonomy, and we also have all those hiring benchmarks that we talked about, which help us find candidates with the right attitudes, motivations, and fit. But just like any other hiring platform, we can also then post jobs to job boards, the popular ones, and we allow you to track the candidate all the way through from, shortlisting all the way through to hiring. And we integrate to a bunch of HRS systems. So at that magic moment when the candidate turns into an employee, you can actually use that integration to create them in your own system. But as well as that, Compono comes with a bonus talent database with over 100,000 candidates already there. So when you've created your job, if there's somebody already out there that completely matches your requirements, they're going to show up in your ranked list.
Amazing. I think that'll be super interesting. And look, we don't have time today, but even think about, we're big proponents of moving from reactive to proactive hiring and the idea of building a talent pipeline. I think there's some really interesting functionality there that Manish and I'd be happy to jump into in more detail. Of course, one thing that we get asked then is this easy to get? Is it easy to get started? We've talked about some pretty powerful stuff here: corporate psychology, people science, lots of assessments, and so absolutely is the question. The North Star as we were building our platform, our people analytics platform, was that it had to be easy, modern, easy, simple, intuitive. All the hard work needed to be done for you. Basically, it's getting the time-saving elements of a hiring tool and the people insights of a corporate psychologist all done for you. So you don't need to worry about building any assessments or doing any of that stuff. All the scientifically validated work has been done already. It's all embedded into the system. You just get the benefit of the outcomes of the insights and of all the business impact improvements that you can realize. So quickly summary, look, it's a really quick, immediate account setup. One thing I do really want to lean into is local customer success and support here in Australia. So our customer success team get rave reviews. We're really focused on giving our customers a great experience, and onboarding is a major focus for us. So you will absolutely not be left in the lurch. You're going to get a great customer experience from that perspective. And I think finally, the last one, do you want me to take this one, Manisha?
Yes, please, Chris.
Yes. I feel like I'm doing all of them, is how much does it cost, right? So everyone's wondering, okay, that all sounds great. How much does it cost? And so what we just have done is publish pricing on our website. So just go to compono.com. You can see how our pricing model works. And of course, every business is a little bit different. So talk to Manisha, myself, or just fill in a book a demo form, and we can talk to you about specific pricing and how this might work inside of your own organization. So look, hopefully that was a really valuable session. I know we covered a lot there. Manisha and I are more than happy to go deep dive into your own sort of situations, environments, and how this might, fit within your own organizations. If you'd like to book a meeting with us so you can do that deep dive and perhaps a bit of a live demo of the system itself, you can just scan this code here and book some time in my diary. So we're really looking forward to hopefully having a whole bunch of you take up that offer and having and continuing this conversation on. So I really want to thank everyone for joining. Hopefully you found that session really valuable. I know Manish and I really enjoyed it. Really want to thank you again, and I hope to speak to you all really soon.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.